January the 6th, 2026. Guys, you're looking at information that could turn out to be very important, and I think that's Pepper. He agrees. Anyway, we talked about Thune getting busted for having the $1.1 million racked up in campaign finance fraud. And we also talked about this morning about no one really trusts Mike Johnson either. Now, General Michael Flynn, we all know who that is, has come up with a report this evening. And I think what Flynn is doing is part of the Trump chess game, just between you and I. He didn't go right back. He didn't want to get into politics. He's not really in the military. He's probably retired, paid, and all that. But he wanted to operate, I think, without the restrictions and the limitations of either of those titles. Here he's saying now, and look, this is important, is Trump playing a 5D chess game? Someone mentioned that today in the video about Cuba. And is he behind Michael Flynn and some of the other people that looked at John Thune's $1.1 million finance campaign fraud? But Michael Flynn is saying Mike Johnson's PACs funnel money back to daycare and healthcare clinics, just like we're seeing in Minnesota. And so what we've talked about is we got to get the Democrats out of there and the rhinos. Someone's listening. And by the way, I watched a little video to where the Republicans came back in this afternoon, and Thune and 3 others were there, and they were very different in the way they were reacting to the press. Thune was the only one that got to talk. He only answered a couple of questions, and then they ran off. No one got to ask him, or maybe it was on purpose, about the $1.1 million election campaign fraud. And he looked very relieved when he got to turn around and run off from the reporters today. Anyway, retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn has leveled explosive allegations against Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, claiming that a lack of accountability regarding massive taxpayer fraud in Minnesota is linked to the Speaker's own financial networks. Imagine this: Mike Johnson and the Somali fraud. In a recent statement, the former National Security Advisor suggested that his private investigation into the robbery of American taxpayers led him directly to the door of Johnson. Now, again, I said I think Flynn is being helped by people with money and influence and power. And in this new role, he is unrestrained. Anyway, Flynn stated he began looking into the lack of federal movement on the Minnesota daycare fraud cases. And this really goes back to the guy Emmer, that's is he the senator or congressman from Minnesota? He's been there for a long time. How did he not know? Now he's trying to stand up now and say that he's here to fight it. But how could you be the representative of a state and not know what's going on there? That's why Tim Walz had to resign today. Now, that's kind of a situation in itself. If Amy Klobuchar runs for the governor, then Walz could end up taking her place until the midterms. And what Flynn is doing, not only exposing the connection, but the reason they haven't acted. Knowing what's going on. Again, for years, over 10 years, they've known about this. Is that money also going to the rhinos? Flynn stated he began looking into the lack of federal movement on the Minnesota daycare fraud cases. His findings, he claims, points to a circular flow of capital, that's how they worked, involving Speaker Johnson's Political Action Committee. They were hiding it. Johnson, probably Thune, and many more. This is the 5D chess move that Trump needs to take advantage of. He can do it with the Insurrection Act. He's only mentioned it in going to 4 cities in 4 different states so far. But he'd also mentioned that George Bush elder guys had done it 22 times during his administration. Anyway, again, his findings, he claims, and I trust Flynn, point to a circular flow of capital involving Speaker Johnson's political action committees. If Trump will act, he's going to have to get rid of Bundy. But if he will act, this will be the takedown of the rhinos along with the Democrats. If not, it will either we will be deceived, the Democrats will take charge after the primary of the House and the Senate, and that will basically take Trump out of power in many ways, or he's got to do a full Insurrection Act. But this would be if you were going to go to a court case, guys, and the judges, Supreme Court saying, Trump, why are you doing the Insurrection Act? Which he really didn't have to deal with the Supreme Court on that. He would say, here is the proof. Mike Johnson, Thune, they're stealing from the American people, just like the Somali pirates. The allegations come at a time of increased scrutiny for Speaker Johnson. While the Speaker had recently pushed for health care reforms, citing rampant fraud in the Affordable Care Act as a primary concern, Flynn argues that the Speaker's own financial backyard warrants an audit. Not only that, if they're doing this, when we're talking about the Affordable Care Act getting canceled out to where the insurance companies don't get the money, we do. We choose the providers, right? But now Thune is going against that, and Flynn would have Johnson would have another vote on it. In other words, they could stop it and let it. I think Thune wants to extend the Affordable Care Act, which no one can afford, and is a ripoff of taxpayer dollars for the next 3 years. Why? Because they're both involved in this Somali fraud, propagated originally by the Democrats, but we're seeing how tightly those are, or how narrow that aisle is between the left and the right. So this is a test for our president and his control over the Department of Justice. And like I said, Trump would have more than just one piece of evidence if he had to present something, or his attorneys present something before the Supreme Court to take down some of these rhinos. Going back to August 6th, last year, 2025, Campaign Legal Center, called the CLC, filed a complaint with the Federal Election Commissioner, FEC, alleging that House Speaker Mike Johnson and his campaign committee, Mike Johnson for Louisiana, violated federal campaign finance laws that prohibit converting campaign funds to personal use. Specifically, CLC's complaint alleged that Johnson's campaign had reported paying $12,500 to date and appears to be continuing to pay $2,500 a month to rent a Washington, D.C. house where Johnson resides, in clear violation of the Federal Election Campaign Act. So he had already been being watched for this. But he wants to stand up there like a little Jesus and preach with those dark, shifty eyes. And if you had him in your group, guys, just average group of guys like me and you, we would throw him out of the club. You're too weird, dude. You're just too weird. Anyway, however, Flynn's allegations takes the narrative a step further, linking leadership PACs to the specific fraud pipelines similar to those plaguing Minnesota social service programs. They're involved. Now, again, it's a test for our president. Information's coming out. I think he trusts Flynn, and I also think that Flynn was kept away from the political scene as far as a cabinet member so that he could work on his path without any kind of bull crap from either side of the aisle. Now, our job now is to make sure and keep the pressure on Thune and Johnson, because none of us trust either one of them. And this is things We've been told that in the end times things would be exposed. And that may be what we're seeing, the corruption and all. And right now we're probably one of the few nations that has a political system set up only because Trump won that can deal with this corruption. So we have to hold everyone's feet to the fire. But I didn't trust Mike Johnson from Jump Street. Thune came in with a bad reputation from Jump Street also. Now, they've both been called out, and it's, again, I mentioned this about Thune a couple of days ago. How are you going to hold your face up? How are you going to hold your head up and talk into a microphone to the people of this nation when we know what you've been doing? It's because their souls are dark. You can tell by their eyes. But Trump and the Department of Justice has to step in. The FCC has to step in, or FEC. They have to do something now, or guys, nothing's going to change. All we're seeing is a brief 4-year reprieve from the destruction that's coming upon almost every nation. So keep that in your thoughts. Keep it in the power of your thoughts that we will not let this happen. Our Father in heaven is going to take care of it. We are his children, and we have the power to stand up and speak it into truth. It's a heads up, guys. Be safe. We'll see in the next few days. They're finally getting back to work after sitting on the butt for 3 weeks. And a month before that, they're worthless. They're crooks. They're grifters. Both sides of the aisle. It's time, I think, for a reset. Just between me and you, I think that Trump needs to declare the Insurrection Act, null and void Congress, Senate and the House, keep his cabinet, and rebuild both of those, both the Senate and the Congress, from new elections that you and I choose, the winners. No more campaign finance fraud. No more people coming in and buying off the politicians. No more getting to the stock market because you are actually involved in adjusting the stock market prices like Pelosi. That's got to end. You got to go back to the original Constitution. It was farmers and people like that that were to be elected, that had a real job. The pay they were getting was not their main pay, but they had a real job because they were real people. Thune has never had a job. I don't know if Mike Johnson has either. I feel sorry for Shreveport and Bossier City, guys, to have to deal with a little young punk creep like that. What is the cartoon he reminds me of? I can't remember now. It's like a little, anyway, it's an old one. But for you guys to have to deal with that, and then the entire nation now, and you don't know if he really elected them or not because of the campaign finance fraud. So these guys are just as guilty as the Somalians and Tim Walz and Ohan. We're watching it, guys. It's going to be very interesting the rest of this week to see how Trump responds and what happens. These guys can no longer hold their face up to us. They barely could in the beginning, but they no longer can look in our eyes and expect us to believe anything. And that disqualifies them from any lawmaking or any decisions about our future. We're watching it. You watch it. It's a heads up. Be safe.